We decided to pair it again with spicy appetizers, things like tortilla chips or anything that has a little spicy Chilean heat kind of a flavor to it so that people could taste it and see how it pairs. Because it has a big initial impact of complex fruit, then it goes through that caramelized flavor and then it gets into its acidity. And usually at the end, there's another kind of fruit note. In this case, it's the orange tangerine grapefruit note. So I'm going to have you taste it straight up first, just so you can notice the last notes. And you really have to pay attention for them.
I'm loving that. I don't think it needs anything, but.
You mean food?
Yeah, no, just pair it with more of this.
Do you have a thirst to learn about wine? Do you love stories about wonderfully obsessive people, hauntingly beautiful places, and amusingly awkward social situations? Well, that's the blend here on the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm your host, Natalie McLean, and each week I share with you unfiltered conversations with celebrities in the wine world, as well as confessions from my own tipsy journey as I write my third book on this subject. I'm so glad you're here. Now pass me that bottle, please, and let's get started. Welcome to episode 111. How is ice wine different from other sweet wines? How does that change the way you drink it and pair it with food? Which pairings should you try beyond dessert? How can you make a delicious Icewine Slushy and pair it with chili chips or wasabi peas for an incredible flavor combination? That's exactly what you'll discover in this episode of the Unreserved Wine Talk podcast. I'm chatting with Karen King, who joins me from the Ice House Winery in Niagara. This conversation took place on my Facebook Live video show several years ago, so please keep that in mind as the context for Karen's comments. In the show notes, you'll find the links to the wines we tasted, the recipe for those slushies, the video version of this chat and a full transcript, how you can join me in a free online wine and food pairing class, and where you can find me on both Instagram and Facebook Live every second Wednesday at 7 p.m., including this evening if you're listening to this podcast on the day it's published. And guess what? We'll be tasting ice wines. That's all in the show notes at nataliemclean.com/111. In the next few months, I'll be hosting virtual wine and chocolate pairing classes for several corporate groups and other organizations, as it has a great tie-in with Valentine's Day, and attendees can participate at home with their loved ones. I'm also doing a twist on that for Galzoni for Galentine's Day. What pairs better with burning his love letters? We'll think about a wine for that. I'm also hosting wine and cheese tastings. If you're interested in my doing this for your group, please email me at natalie@nataliemclean.com. You'll also find my contact in the show notes. Now, on a personal note before we dive into the show. Recall a time you were embarrassed while playing a sport. That was the next question on the card game we were playing in the kitchen. My son Ryan was home with Miles and me from Waterloo for the holidays, and my mother in Nova Scotia joined us via Zoom. In Highland dancing competitions, I answered, I wore a long artificial braid coiled in a bun on top of my head since my hair was always tomboy short. My mom smiled because she knew this story. So I continued, I was in the Canadian Championships and I could feel my hairpiece loosening as I swung my partner in the reel. It started circling my head, helicopter style, until it gained enough momentum to fly off completely and land on the floor in front of the judge. I heard a low gasp from the crowd in the bleachers. What happened? Ryan asked. Well, I was next-level teenage mortified, but I kept dancing. I should have been disqualified, but I placed 5th. How'd you manage that? Miles asked. I found out later that the judge thought it was sporting of me to finish the dance rather than to walk off the stage. What about you? Did the holidays bring back a particular memory, whether it was embarrassing or not? I'd love to hear from you about it. Tag me on social media at Natalie McLean on Facebook or Twitter, or at Natalie McLean Wine on Instagram. Okay, on with the show.
Karen King and her husband, Jaime McFarland, own the Ice House in Niagara. She does the marketing, he makes the wine. Their approach to ice wine, however, is radically different from most wineries in terms of the style of wine they make and how they serve it, from slushies to pairings with chili stacks and wasabi peas. Karen joins me today to talk about that and a whole lot more. Welcome, Karen.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Before we dive into those aspects about your wine and those interesting pairings, let's talk about some of the research you did recently about ice wine in general, in terms of who's drinking it and when.
Well, we wanted to really have an understanding about who our target group was. So we wanted to know how young people might think differently about ice wine versus the baby boomers, which is our generation. And we found out that the younger people were really open to all kinds of different ways of using ice wine, whereas other people who had been taught that ice wine was a dessert wine, it was a little tougher to change that perspective for them. So then we had a challenge. We said, what can we do to make those younger people really enjoy ice wine?
I'm remembering a little bit from the research. It was a 2080 rule. What was that?
Well, with the 2080 rule, the idea is about 20% of people drink dessert wine. So that's not a lot of our population. And 80% are interested in ice wine as cocktails. So it was like, oh, here's a great opportunity. What can we do to make people really enjoy the ice wine?
Absolutely, because I always think of ice wine, of course, as our iconic wine in Canada, but we keep saving it for special occasions or gifts or whatever. So I think you're onto something with trying to make ice wine more than just a special occasion wine.
And I think the thing that started to click for me was how, as Canadians, we are seen as more approachable and we're willing to bend the rules a little bit and not follow tradition in quite the same way. And I love the Olympics when they came out, the Canadians came out in their jean jacket. You know, that's who we are. We're a little more laid back, a little more casual about the rules of drinking. So this is what we're looking at.
Okay, so you're breaking the rules in a couple of different ways. Let's first talk about the style of your ice wine and what Jaime has developed there in terms of how the ice wine itself, without the pairings, your style is a bit different from others.
Yeah, and what we did at the beginning, we both have a background in sensory research. So we started off by doing a competitive set evaluation to map out different ice wines to see where they were. And most of them had a real sweet top note. And then they had different fruit flavors. We knew it's part of the terroir and the grape that would give the different fruit flavors. But Jaime was quite fascinated by the whole concept of, could he make his ice wine be more crisp and refreshing by increasing the acidity? And that was his challenge.
Wow. And so is there actually lower sugar content in your ice wine, or is it just that the acidity is a bit more pronounced?
That's it exactly. The sugar content has to be a certain level to be an ice wine, but it's the crispness of it through acidity that really made the difference in the way it delivers in your mouth. And we got really interested in the whole concept of beginning, middle, and end of tasting, the whole taste profile. That's what really made the difference in the aftertaste, the lingering taste that left the mouth feeling refreshed.
Okay, that's great. And what you bring to the table, Karen, is a background in food sensory research and consulting. Tell me a little bit about that, because it was quite different from the wine field. You were more in the food area.
Right.
What did you do and how did that help with what you're doing today?
I worked in every food category you can imagine. I did a lot of work for Kraft Canada and US and then smaller food companies. And it was always about trying to get a balanced flavor that would appeal to more of the people more of the time. So when you start thinking about that in the wine region, most winemakers were not necessarily open to that concept of hearing what consumers wanted. Jaime was the first winemaker I met who was interested in really understanding what consumers wanted. So he had a different slant on how did he want to make his wine. I love the artisan concept of winemakers want to make a wine that they think is perfect, and chefs do too. But we were really working on this concept of developing wines that people would like based on where they are and perhaps where they want to go.
And so now you're breaking the rules. I love it with how you serve ice wine. And one of your signature drinks, cocktails, I'm not sure how you characterize it, is your Ice House Slushy.
Right.
And so tell me about that.
Well, the thing that really got me excited about focusing on one product like this is with the overall intensity of ice wine, there's an 11-point scale we can rate it on to say whether it's low, moderate, or high. And ice wine is actually high in overall intensity. When we compared it to other beverages, whether it was wine or even Coke, that's more of a moderate overall intensity that will, again, be sort of familiar to people and intensity that they like. So with the slushy, we said, okay, right now it's high intensity. What can we do to make it less high in overall impact? And I know you're familiar with the late harvest wines, which people have said, oh, I like those wines because they're not quite as sweet. Now you add the not quite as high in overall intensity. You still have the sweetness, the acidity, and the complex fruit. But now with the ice in it, it does become moderate in overall intensity. So people love it. We were blown away. We got this great big slushy machine and we said, we're going to make a cocktail. And Jaime had to add water in order to freeze the ice wine. And then I tasted it and I said, it's perfect. We don't have to do anything else. And so then we developed recipe cards so that everyone can make it at home in a blender.
That is so cool. And we're going to do a little demo today.
Okay.
I hope my ice hasn't melted too much. You've got ice there too?
I've got ice there too. I'm just going to flush it up a bit more.
Okay, great. I'm draining off my melted water. I'm not sure what the proportions are supposed to be here, Karen.
Well, here's the simplest way. I put ice cubes in a blender and then I cover it with enough ice wine that it then will slush up. And then I usually actually add more ice.
Okay. Which of your ice wines should we be putting on the ice?
We've tried all of them, and the Vidal is what's called the classic ice wine. And this Northern Ice has that crispness to it. And we feel that this is really the best ice wine for making a very refreshing ice wine slushy. So like today here, it's hot today. So my ice wine slushy is getting pretty watery too. I think, well, it's watered down, but I'm going to ask you to taste it anyway, because the whole concept is overall intensity. So I'm going to taste it too. I haven't tried it this watered down. So we're creating something new right here, Natalie.
Absolutely. I'm going to taste the ice wine on its own and as a slushy.
Good thinking.
I like to be thorough and hedonistic in my research. Anyway.
Well, that's good, because then you'll get an idea of the difference of moderate and intense.
That is so refreshing. And I wouldn't even think, like, just off dry is how it comes across.
Yes. Isn't that fun?
It's nice. It's really nice.
I think it's better when it's a slushy. And I usually do this martini glass thing.
Oh, very Cosmo or sexy or something.
Yeah. Mine's not frozen anymore. It's just gotten too hot. But it's a nice, elegant drink. But I love the juxtaposition of classy ice wine as a slushy. You know, it makes it more approachable for people. And
it does.
Yeah,
it does. And
really,
it's simple. It's simple to do.
We did put it on a recipe card because I would have people calling up and say, what was that recipe again? So we do give that out when anybody comes to visit us at the winery. So they have their little card to make Ice House Slushies.
Yeah, it's dramatically different, though, I've got to say. The ice wine on its own is beautiful. It's a lovely after dinner drink, but I really would change this with the ice to the beginning of the meal as a lighter aperitif that's not too heavy, not too sweet, you know, whet your appetite kind of drink.
And so while you've got that Vidal, do you want to try it with the wasabi peas?
Oh, yeah.
I'll give you the story behind that.
Okay, yeah, wasabi peas. I must say, I went into my local grocery store and they said, what? You should go to a specialty food store. But I found them, per your suggestion, in the bulk barn, covered with wasabi.
And usually in the nut section of Sobeys or Loblaws, they do have wasabi peas. Sometimes they have them in, even No Frills sells wasabi peas. I've seen them. So they're everywhere. It's just
Japanese horseradish or mustard seed kind of flavor. It's hot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when we had people coming into the winery and we really wanted to demonstrate the idea of breaking the rules that ice wine is for dessert. So we went back to the pure pure ice wine. We're still serving it in smaller glasses because the idea of serving ice wine with appetizers at the beginning of the meal, here was our thought. This is big flavor. You're hungry. Usually appetizers have big flavor and you're hungry. So this with a wasabi pea really does create a party in your mouth. It's the sweetness and the acidity and then the heat and the salt. And I want you to taste it. I hope you haven't tasted it before. Taste it. I'll join you.
This is a new sensation for me, but I've always heard the concept of sweet meets heat. And there's something that happens that's a good thing there.
Yeah.
Okay.
And a little bit of heat on that wasabi.
Oh, yeah. Boom.
And now take it with the ice wine.
That's nice. That's nice. That really evens each other out.
So once you've experienced that, I think that gives you sort of an incentive to play with ice wine. And it takes it out of the box of this is a dessert wine. And truly, I don't drink dessert wine. I find it's too much of a good thing with a dessert, maybe as a dessert, but I like it at the beginning of the meal. That's when my taste buds are really open to intense and complex flavors. And that's when I like to try it.
Right. And did you ever think of, I suppose maybe this is just too much of a challenge, but bottling the ice wine slushy as a slushy?
Right. We can't actually because of all of the legalities around ice wine. We can't call it an ice wine slushy. It would have to be called something else. And so we think the versatility of the ice wine is the interesting piece. So yeah, you can use it as a slushy. But what I've done with this Vidal is Jaime makes a very simple white wine that doesn't have the kind of fruit forward I like. So I add about 20% of the ice wine to his simple white wine.
I've got a Pinot Grigio here that needs a lot of help.
Okay, really? Okay, try it. Try it.
So what's the proportion?
It's the art of blending. So you're the winemaker. And this really, Jaime says encourage people to be the winemaker. So put about 25%. What's wrong with it? Tell me what's wrong with it.
What's wrong with it?
Yeah,
Is there supposed to be something wrong with it?
No, I'm talking about the Pinot Grigio that needs help.
Oh, it's just boring.
Okay, yeah. So if it's boring, try about 25%.
Nice. Because the Pinot Grigio had the acidity, more acidity, but it tasted like beige. And now we've got something that came from a designer guy palette.
Wow, I love it. I think the trick is to add enough ice wine that there's a threshold, just detectable change, but you don't want to make it into an ice wine. You're just playing.
This is just a richly flavored white wine, almost dry.
Wow, love it.
I love it too. Karen, you wanted to talk first about your Riesling Ice Wine. What do you do with this one that's unusual?
Well, Riesling, this one blew me away because I hadn't tasted a Riesling ice wine that had an orange, tangerine, grapefruit note. And that's one of my favorite notes in a white wine. So when Jaime made this one, it was like, oh, this is really heaven. So we decided to pair it again with spicy appetizers. Now, because we're in the winery, we look for simple things that you can pair it with. Things like rice works or tortilla chips or anything that has a little spicy Chilean heat kind of a flavor to it so that people could taste it and see how it pairs. And the thing that I'm always looking for with pairing with ice wine is, again, that because it has a big initial impact of complex fruit, then it goes through that caramelized flavor, and then it gets into its acidity. And usually at the end, there's another different kind of fruit note. In this case, it's the orange, tangerine, grapefruit note. So I'm going to have you taste it straight up first, just so you can notice the last notes. And you really have to pay attention for them.
I'm loving that. I don't think it needs anything, but...
You mean food?
Yeah, no, just pair it with more of this.
Yeah, well, and again, for the experience of knowing how it does go with spice, I'm going to invite you to try those. I think you have Rice Works with you.
I have various chips. What's left here? I've been nibbling on them. I have chipotle, I have chili, jalapeno, and I have lime chips. Like I have all three here.
Okay. Well, the chili is really a good example of how the Riesling goes well with spicy. So why don't you try that with the Riesling?
Okay. loud crunching noise.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. I like it. What's it doing? What's the combination doing here?
Those ones have that chili and salt. So this is the chemistry, 101. You've got basic tastes of sweet, sour, bitter, and salt. The ice wine has the sweet and the acidity. So whenever you introduce the third basic note, you're getting more complexity in your mouth. Like the aromatics have to be good. But as soon as you introduce a third basic taste, now your mouth is going, oh, that's fun. That's kind of giving me something different. And that is really what makes it work. The other piece is long flavor delivery. Ice wine has such a long flavor delivery. It can marry and pair up with foods that have that long flavor delivery. A simple white wine would be killed by that kind of intensity. But we're enjoying this particular one with Indian food, where I remember reading, don't serve wine with Indian food because it doesn't stand up to it. But this Riesling or our Vidal really does make it taste very rich and powerful.
Yeah, it really just soaks it up. And yet, as you said, you've got various elements with the ice wine already. The spicy chips, whether they're jalapeno or chipotle, which is the Mexican version of spicy chips, just adds another note. It's truly is, to perhaps use a cliche, like adding a couple more instruments into the orchestra.
Oh, so I love that.
It was pleasant listening to the opening overture, but now we're bringing in the woodwinds and the percussion undertone. And our mouth is having a lot more fun.
Yeah. And I love that you're talking about music. I see flavor profiles as music. And the next one that we're going to be looking at, which is the Cabernet Sauvignon and Dornfelder ice wine, it's what I call lower toned fruit notes. Part of the research we did was wanting to understand sort of the emotional drivers around different kinds of occasions for drinking wine. And we learned that the Riesling and the Vidal, they're kind of light and fun and, you do the party thing with those. But with the Cabernet Sauvignon, there's a mellowness to it that really just makes you want to relax. So because you've had a hard day, Natalie.
I know. Drinking all day, people just don't know.
I'm gonna invite you to have this one with your chocolate. But start with this because I want you to.
Okay.
Do you want me to tell you the notes that we've identified, or you want to do it yourself?
No, I would like to be told first.
So there is a background dark cherry note. And these are, of course, just for viewers who don't know that ice wine, we do not add anything to it. The change of the nuances of notes is only Mother Nature can do that. So the concept of taking grapes and putting them in your freezer and hoping that you get all these wonderful nuances of different fruit notes is not going to happen. Only Mother Nature make the change on the vine. So with this, there's a dark cherry note that is enhanced with bitter chocolate. And so it's a note at the beginning. There's also a little bit of a cooked raspberry, a fresh strawberry, a plum, a fig. And then people often say there's a port quality to it. So it's complex and it's mellow.
It's lovely. And your power of suggestion is working.
Good.
I'm getting all that.
I think the other thing that I love about this, the color of this is a real ruby red. Jaime had made a Cabernet Sauvignon previously that was it was pinkish salmon. So he wanted to get a richer ruby red, and he used a Dornfelder grape in his ice wine to get that very rich red color.
And is Dornfelder the German version of Pinot Noir?
What I've heard, it's a grape that originated in Germany, but it's now being grown here. So it's like another varietal.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, I went ahead.
For the chocolate? Okay. So now you're adding that bitter note.
Mm. And the ice wine is now not as sweet in a good way.
Yeah.
I'm liking that a lot.
If you like dark chocolate desserts, then this is when I'd say go for dessert with this one. If you want to do an ice wine for dessert, the others, I'd say they're more fun at the beginning of the meal.
This one's really working. Because dark chocolate can be bitter, but the ice wine fills it out. So there's no bitterness, but the chocolate rushes in and
Yeah.
fills
And I
out
think
the ice wine. Yeah.
I think that whole idea of emotionally, how do you feel at the end of a meal? You want to be mellow.
Yeah.
And this is more of a mellow wine. And it's like I can't really explain from a musical point of view why that is. From a sensory profile, I can do a profile and say, oh, that makes sense. But you know when music is mellow, you know when a wine is mellow. And that's
Yeah.
what this is.
Absolutely. This is a burning embers kind of wine.
Mm.
Just flickering little red eyes in the fireplace. Okay.
And then if you still got that boring Pinot Grigio that you had,
Oh, yeah.
this add about just enough color to make it a rosé and see what it does for you.
Fun. Oh, whoops. I think I went beyond rosé, but anyway.
Okay.
Not too bad. Okay. Here we go.
What you don't want to do is add too much so that you're now tasting like an ice wine. It's that threshold level that just enhances it and takes care of either making it more interesting and longer in flavor delivery, or I've used it in a red wine that is too astringent for my liking, and it just smooths it out beautifully.
That's nice. What I'm getting now are wild tart raspberries.
Oh, isn't that fun?
Yes. I'm running through an open field of them. I'll be back. That is so great, Karen. Oh, I love the way you've redesigned ice wine.
Thank you. It's been really fun. I mean, it's fun. It really is.
So speaking of designing, tell me about your experiences. You were on The Big Decision on CBC and Stephen and Chris, the designer guys. So I think it started with The Big Decision. Is that right?
It did. We were a small winery that my brother is the finance guy. And I said, Kevin, how much money have I got in my advertising and marketing budget to move forward? I had just really started the role. And he said, nothing. And I said, okay. So I love social media because it sort of evens out the playing field for all of us doing different things. And I decided to apply for The Big Decision. And then I had to take photos. I had to use my camera and take photos of us and write quite a long proposal of why we thought we would be a good candidate for the show. And we really wanted to get some awareness about the Ice House out there. And the day after the show aired, our hits on our website went from 100 or so to over 7,000.
Wow. And why do you think they chose you? Like, I'm sure there are a lot of struggling wineries. It's not a high margin business. So why did they pick you?
Well, first of all, you have to enter or you have to apply. You have to be willing to say, you know what, they're going to show you the way they're going to show you. And if that's okay with you, that's okay. And on the Stephen and Chris show, I made a blunder on this element that I brought to show how you can press ice wine. And they said, didn't you prepare yourself for national TV? And it was one of those crazy days, and I thought, sorry. But you know what? That happens in my life on a regular basis. You just can't be prepared for everything. You can't. And
absolutely. Yeah. No, people like reality. So you were on The Big Decision and you went through the whole business case with them. What were the key insights that you got from, I assume it was mostly Jim Treliving that you spoke with? Yeah.
The biggest thing he did for us was to give us confidence in the project. He said to us, you guys can probably do it on your own, but I'd like to invest. And what we said was, can we wait another 6 months because we're getting into the busy season? We want to know how we're really doing. So we're still negotiating with him. We haven't yet come to any conclusion. But, when you have someone like Jim Treliving believe in your product, it really does feel solid. And so that felt good.
And then on Stephen and Chris, did you see another big hit on your website or?
They were fabulous. I mean, they were willing to really work with it. And even, I think what's neat now, when people come to the winery, they come and they say, oh, hi. It's like they know me. And somebody said, oh, you're like a celebrity. And somebody else said, no, you're really not like a celebrity. You're like an old high school friend that we know about you, And so that's great because we want people who come to the winery to feel welcomed. We want them to feel like they're an old friend. And, the hardest time is when we have too many people coming in at once and we can't give them the attention we really want to give them. The theory behind it was when someone comes to my house, they always get a drink and they always get something to eat. And it's the same thing at the winery.
I'll be right over.
Well, we hope you do. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so for folks who want to visit you, Karen, what part of Niagara are you in?
Well, we're in Niagara on the lake, and we're on the Niagara Parkway, which is the main road that goes into Niagara on the lake. And it also feeds from Niagara Falls. So people who go to the falls and then they want to go into Niagara on the lake, we're the first winery on the left. So our location was really great. So we were actually having more visitors internationally until the big decision than we had Canadian visitors. They just didn't know about us. They didn't stumble across us. So the big decision has brought a lot of Canadians. And truly, we keep saying we're Canadian and we're proud of it. Jamie's one of the few Canadian winemakers who's really had a success. So we're going, yay, 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 we're Canadian.
I'll drink to that.
Thank you.
All right, Karen, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
This is my blend, I think. Anyway.
Oh, cool. Oh, the rosé?
Oh, yeah. I'm going to have fun with this. This isn't
Good.
over. Anyway, thank you, Karen. Take
My
care.
pleasure.
And all the best to you.
Thank you very much.
Well, there you have it. I hope you enjoyed my chat with Karen King. Here are my takeaways. Number 1, Karen reveals some interesting stats. Only 20% of wine lovers drink dessert wine, but 80% are interested in them as cocktails, particularly younger people. I think it's so smart that she came up with a way to make ice wine more accessible and have a broader reach with the slushies, even though purists might be horrified. I think they really lower the intensity and the flavor and sweetness of ice wine, making them more palatable. 2, her pairings of chili chips and wasabi peas are simply brilliant with ice wine. That combination of heat and salt and sweetness and acidity was a real party for my mouth, I gotta say. Also, I suggest you try other chip flavors like chipotle and lime and jalapeno. And 3, I really like Karen's observations on high-toned fruit like peach, pear, and apricot in Vidal or white ice wines, versus the lower-tone, more mellow fruit of Cabernet-based ice wine, with notes of dark berries and plums and cherries. In the show notes, you'll find links to the wines we tasted, the recipe for those slushies, the video version of this chat and a full transcript, and how you can join me in a free online wine and food pairing class, and where you can find me on both Instagram and Facebook live every second Wednesday at 7 p.m., including tonight, if you're listening to this, on the day the podcast is published. We'll be tasting some awesome ice wines and talking more about how they're made and what to pair and all the rest of it. You'll find that all in the show notes at nataliemaclean.com/111. If you're interested in my hosting a wine and cheese or wine and chocolate tasting for your group, please email me at natalie@nataliemaclean.com. You'll also find my contact in the show notes. You won't want to miss next week when I'll be chatting with New Zealand winemaker Richard Painter of Left Field Wines. He has some great stories and wines to share. In the meantime, if you missed episode 3, go back and take a listen. I chat about why you like the wines you do with Marnie Old and Jean-Charles Boisset. I'll share a short clip with you now to whet your appetite.
And for many people, one of the reasons it's hard to put your finger on exactly what it is that you like or dislike about a wine is because it's so difficult to learn to recognize and describe the tactile elements of wine, the things that you feel on impact, the prickle of carbonation, the kind of bracing knife-like edge of acidity, the mouth-filling richness that we get with higher alcohol content in the wine, and so on. These are not simply aspects of wine that are important to its taste or to its smell, but also to the way that it impacts on the palate. And that, I have to tell you, is often the make or break factor for many people about whether they like a wine and want to try it again, or whether they would rather try something new next time.
If you liked this episode, please tell one friend about it this week, especially someone you know who'd be interested in the ice wine tips and cocktails and pairings that Karen shared. Thank you for taking the time to join me here. I hope something great is in your glass this week. Perhaps a lovely ice wine with chili chips. You don't want to miss one juicy episode of this podcast, especially the secret, full-bodied bonus episodes that I don't announce on social media. So, subscribe for free now at nataliemclean.com/subscribe. Meet me here next week. Cheers.